The chains broke at moonrise, and I did not run. I stood in the kennel yard of Hollowmere with my boots in the frost and listened to 40 years of iron come apart link by link, and I thought, good, let it end tonight, one way or the other. Behind me the hold was emptying. I heard doors barred, I heard my own men groan Lycans, warriors who had held the northern pass against 3 packs and not blinked, going up the stair 2 steps at a time with their breath sawing in their throats. I did not blame them. I had made those wolves. I knew exactly what was coming out of that gate. They came out low. 9 of them wore bread shoulders like millstones, coats the gray of wet slate, and their eyes had nothing left in them. Not hunger, not rage. Rage I could have used. Rage has a shape you can push against. What looked out of those wolves was the flat, patient nothing of a creature that has been given a purpose, and then had the purpose taken away and been left alive anyway. They had been bred to hold a line in a war that ended before half of them were whelped. 40 years without a war. 40 years of iron and meat and a locked gate, and my grandfather's sin curdling in them, and mine because I had kept the gate locked too, because it was easier. The lead wolf, the old scarred one my kennel master had never dared name, set his forefeet down in the frost and lifted his head to me and did not bow. That was the thing. That was the whole thing, and I had lived under it my entire reign. A Lycan King's wolves bow. It is not ceremony. It is not obedience. It is the oldest true thing in our blood. The pack knows its king, and the pack lowers its head, and every man watching knows the crown sits where it belongs. In 40 years, not one wolf of Hollowmere had lowered its head to a living soul. Not to my grandfather who beat them. Not to my father who starved them. Not to me, who at least had the decency to only ignore them. The northern lords knew it. The southern lords knew it. Every hold from the lake to the mountains knew that Rorik of Hollowmere held his throne with his hands, because his wolves would not give it to him. Bar the yard, I said without turning. My king. Bar it, all of you inside, now. I heard the bolts go home. I heard men who loved me weeping behind a 2-inch oak door because they thought they were hearing the last hour of my life, and honestly, I had made my peace with the arithmetic. 9 of them. 1 of me. I am a big man and my beast is bigger and I have killed things that deserved it, but 9 is 9, and I was tired in a way that had stopped being about sleep about a decade ago. I unbuckled my cloak. I let it fall in the frost. And a voice on the far side of the yard said quite calmly, "Is someone hurt?" I heard chains. I turned so fast I nearly went down. She was standing in the open arch of the water gate, the low arch that lets the lake in, that nobody uses, that nobody had thought to bar because nobody in their right mind comes into Hollowmere from the water side at night in autumn. A small woman in a wet cloak the color of nothing. Hair in a braid that had given up hours ago. A pack on her back, a stick in her right hand and her left hand out in front of her, moving, reading the air the way you'd read a wall. She was not looking at the wolves. She was not looking at anything. Her eyes were open and pale and turned about 10 degrees to the left of where I actually stood, and they were the most peaceful eyes I have ever seen in a face. And she had just walked 40 feet into a yard containing 9 feral werewolves without breaking stride, because she did not know they were there. "Don't move," I said. My voice came out wrong. "I'm not moving, I'm standing." A pause. She tilted her head. "You're breathing like a man about to do something stupid. I know that breathing. My father breathed like that before he sold a horse." "Woman." "Ilse. Ilse, there are 9 wolves in this yard." "Yes," she said. "I can smell them. Wet dog and old iron, and one of them is limping. I can hear it in the frost, 3 good feet and 1 bad. Is that what the chains were?" And then, with a small crease of concern, entirely genuine, entirely misdirected, "Are they yours? They sound unhappy." The lead wolf had turned his head. I want to be precise about this, because I have gone over it every night since, and I want to be precise. He did not charge. He did not crouch. He turned his head the way a man turns his head in a crowded hall when he hears one particular voice, and his ears came forward off his skull for the first time in the 12 years I had been king, and something moved behind his flat, dead eyes that I did not have a name for. The other 8 had gone very still. "Ilse," I said, and I made my voice the voice I use on a battlefield, low and flat and absolutely unhurried because a shout would have finished it. "Listen to me. Do not run. Do not scream. Walk backwards slowly the way you came and go back through the arch and I will." "Oh," she said, "you're afraid of them." "I am not." "You are." She sounded almost sorry for me. She shifted her weight, took her stick, and I swear before every moon that ever rose she sat down, on the frozen stone, in the middle of a yard full of feral wolves, crossed her legs, set her pack beside her, and put her hands palm up on her knees like a woman settling in to wait out weather. "Well, I can't walk backwards. I've been walking since dawn and I don't know your ground, and if I go backwards I'll fall in your lake, and I've already fallen in one lake this year. So I'm going to sit here until they decide. It's what I do with dogs." "They are not dogs." "No," she agreed. "Dogs are worse. Dogs have opinions." And then she began to hum. I have heard singing. I have sat at the high table while paid throats did clever things to a note for an hour. This was not that. It was low and slightly flat and unbothered, the sound a woman makes to herself while she works, a nothing tune, a tune to keep her own company in the dark she carries with her everywhere. It went out across that yard, and it hit that iron and that frost, and it did not bounce back. The old wolf took a step toward her. I moved. I got 2 strides before something behind my breastbone, my beast, the thing I have leashed since I was 15, the thing that has never once in my life made a sound I did not order it to make, stopped. Not stilled. Not rose. Stopped, the way a hammer stops mid-swing when the man swinging it sees what he is about to hit. And underneath the stopping there was a sensation I can only describe by saying it felt like being handed something. I stood in the middle of my own kennel yard, 3 strides from the woman, with my hands open and useless, and my beast set its weight down and would not move. The old scarred wolf walked past me as if I were a post. He went to her at a slow, deliberate limp. He was the lame one. She'd counted his feet from the sound of frost, 40 feet away in the dark, and he put his enormous ruined head down until his muzzle was a hand's breadth from her palm-up hand, and he breathed her in, and the hum never faltered. Not a hitch, not a tremble. She did not know he was there. Or she did. I have never settled it. "Hello," she said pleasantly to the air, and turned her hand over and laid it flat on the top of his skull. The wolf sat down. Behind him, one by one in the frost, in the dark, in the ruin of my grandfather's kennel, the other 8 sat down too. They did not bow, not that night. I want to be honest about that, because later there were 100 men in that hold who swore they'd seen the whole pack bow at the Watergate on the equinox, and it isn't true, and the truth is better. They sat. 9 werewolves in a rough half-circle around a small blind woman on the freezing stone, ears forward, tails still, listening, 9 animals who had been given nothing but iron for 40 years. Being handed a flat little tune by someone who wanted absolutely nothing from them. And I stood there in my shirt sleeves with my cloak in the frost, and my beast quiet as a chapel, and I thought, with the strange clarity you get when your life stops making the shape it made an hour ago, I have been doing this wrong. Not the wolves, not only the wolves. All of it. She stopped humming eventually. Not because anything happened, because she got to the end of the tune, and she was too practical to start it again for no reason. "They've stopped panting," she said. "That's good. They were panting like they'd been running." "They had been," I said, "at the gate for 40 years. Her face turned a little more toward me. She had a way of aiming her attention that was uncannily accurate and always just slightly off, like a woman looking at the door beside the door you were standing in. "That's a very sad sentence," she said. "Are you the man who feeds them?" I opened my mouth to say I am the king of this hold, and what came out was, "No, nobody feeds them. Men throw meat over a wall." "Ah," she nodded slowly. Her hand was still on the old wolf's head. He had not moved. He had, in fact, begun very slightly to lean. Then I've been rude. I've made a fuss of a dog in front of the man who's been throwing meat over a wall at it for 40 years, and now you feel wretched, and I can hear it. So I'm going to stop talking, and you're going to tell me whether there's an inn in this town, or whether I'm sleeping under something with a roof and no questions asked. I have 4 coppers and I can sing for a bed, but if I'm honest I'd rather have the bed and skip the singing, because my throat's been raw since the pass. There is no town, I said. This is Hollowmere, this is the King's Hold, you came in through the water gate. She sat with that a moment. Ah, she said again in a completely different tone, and then, absolutely without fear, with something that I realized with genuine offense was amusement. So you're not the man who feeds the dogs. No, you're the man who doesn't. I have had men flogged for less. I have had lords go grey and quiet in my hall for a great deal less than that. And here was a beggar singer with wet boots and 4 coppers, sitting on my kennel stones with my grandfather's monster leaning against her, telling me exactly what I was, in a light and friendly voice, without the smallest apparent interest in my rank. And the worst of it, the thing I could not get past, standing there, was that she was right, and she had worked it out in under a minute, blind, from the sound of my breathing, and a sentence about meat and a wall. My name is Rorik, I said. Ilse, she said. You said, well, I said. She frowned. You didn't say, you said woman. I did. Yes. She patted the old wolf's head twice briskly, the way you'd finish with a horse. Try harder. And she got her stick under her and stood up, and 9 feral war-wolves that had not let a living man inside their reach in 4 decades shifted out of her way. And one of them, the young one on the left with the torn ear, dropped his shoulder and pushed his skull under her free hand as she rose, to steady her. To steady her. I put my hand out, I don't know what for. There was nothing to catch, and I heard my own beast, somewhere behind my ribs, make a low sound I had never heard it make. Not a growl, not a howl. Something like there you are. I gave her the east chamber. She protested. She wanted a stable and a blanket. She was very clear that she had no intention of being any trouble and no interest whatsoever in charity. I told her the stable was full. It was a lie. She heard it was a lie. I saw the corner of her mouth move, and she took the east chamber anyway because she was cold, and because she was, above everything else I would learn about her over the following weeks, a practical woman. Then I went and stood on the wall over the kennel yard until dawn, which is a thing kings do when they have run out of orders to give. Allen found me there. Allen had been my father's kennel master and was now nobody's. A bent old man with 2 fingers gone off his left hand and a permanent flinch in his shoulders, and he came up the stair slowly and stood beside me and looked down at what was in the yard. The 9 wolves were lying in a ring. Not against the walls where they always lay, backs to stone, facing outward, the way animals lie when they expect the world to come at them. In a ring in the open in the middle of the frost, facing inward around a patch of empty stone where a woman had sat and hummed a tune she didn't even like very much. They haven't lain in the open since I were a boy, Allen said. No. Your grandfather said they was ruined. My grandfather ruined them. Allen was quiet a long moment. Aye, he said. Down in the yard, the old scarred one lifted his head and looked precisely, unmistakably, at the shuttered window of the east chamber, where a blind woman was asleep with 4 coppers in her boot. Allen, I said, who is she? Beggar singer, my king, come over the pass with a carter. Carter left her at the lake road because she wouldn't pay double, he sniffed. Blind since a fever, she says, sings for bread. There's 1,000 of 'em. There is not, I said, one of them. And Allen, who had known me since I was a boy small enough to be lifted, looked sideways at his king in the gray light and did not say anything at all, but he smiled, and I saw it, and I did not order him to stop. She should have left in the morning. That was the arrangement, a bed, a meal, the road, and a hold full of hard men going quietly back to being what they had been. She stayed because of the limp. "He's got something in the pad," she announced at breakfast in my hall at my table, to which she had been shown by a serving boy who had gone straight past 6 lords' chairs to seat her at my left hand, and I let him, and the lords looked at each other and I stared them flat until they looked at their plates. "The old one, the big one, he's not lame from a break, he's lame from a thing. You can hear it, breaks a rhythm. This is a flinch." "Nobody," I said, "has touched that wolf in 40 years. She buttered her bread. "Then he's had a thing in his foot for a very long time," she said, "and no wonder he's in a mood." The hall went quiet. "I'm not asking your leave to be brave," she added with her mouth full, entirely unbothered. "I'm asking your leave to be useful, which is different and cheaper, and I'd like to earn my bed. And also I would like a pair of tweezers and some fat, and if you have honey, honey." I looked down the table. 60 faces looked back. Warriors. My Uncle Vayer, who had wanted my father's chair and settled for wanting mine. My northern captains. A hold that had been carrying its king's shame like a stone in the boot since before most of them were born, all of them staring at a small blind woman asking for tweezers. "Vayer," I said, "fetch honey." My uncle's jaw came forward. "My king, you heard the lady." He fetched the honey. It took him a long time, and he set the pot down hard, and the sound it made on the board was the sound of a man promising himself something. I should have paid more attention to that. I was watching her hands. Took her the whole morning. She would not let me hold him. She would not let anyone hold him, she said, quite reasonably, that a wolf who has been held down by men for 40 years does not need to be held down by men one more time, and that if he wanted to take her hand off, he would take her hand off, and that would be a thing that had happened. She sat in the frost with her legs crossed and put her palm up and waited, and he came, and she talked to him the whole time. Nothing clever. Nonsense. The weather, the carter who wouldn't take her over the pass, a dog she'd had at 9 years old called Bread, who was a bad dog. He put his foot in her hand. 40 men on the wall watched the old scarred killer of Hollowmere lift his ruined forefoot and set it, deliberately, into the open palm of a blind beggar, and I heard grown Lycans behind me make small sounds they would deny to their graves. She found it in about 4 minutes. A splinter of iron, black with age, driven up under the pad and grown over a piece of his own chain in his own foot, for who knows how many years. She got it out with a pair of eyebrow tweezers in her thumb, and he screamed. And every man on that wall grabbed for a weapon, and she said, "Yes, I know, that was horrid, we're done, in the exact tone you'd use for a child with a scraped knee, and he did not bite her. He put his head in her lap. She packed the wound with honey and fat and tore a strip off her own shift to bind it, which is the only reason I know she owned exactly 1 shift. Then she said, without turning round, to a wall she could not see, in front of every soul in my hold, "Somebody's going to have to come and take this off me, because he's gone to sleep on my legs and I can't feel my feet." Nobody moved. I went down the stair. I crossed the yard, and my men held their breath, and 8 wolves watched me come and did not rise. I knelt in the frost beside her, close enough to smell the honey and the lake water still in her cloak and the iron under her nails. The old wolf opened one eye at me, and he did not lift his head from her lap, and he did not lift his lip, and he looked at me with an expression that I can only describe in the plainest words I have, as a wolf deciding whether a man is worth the trouble. "Well," Il said, "is he asleep?" "He is looking at me," I said. "Yes, he does that," she said. "He's very rude about it, isn't he, like he's pricing you." I put my hands under him. He was heavier than a man in armor. I lifted him off her lap and set him down in the frost. And he let me, and that, a Hollowmere war-wolf allowing the king's hands on him, was the thing that made old Olin sit down abruptly on the kennel step and put his face in his ruined hand. Ilse got her feet under her, hissing at the pins and needles, and reached out to steady herself, and got a fistful of my shirt. She went still, her hand flattened, right over the breastbone, over the place where my beast lived, which had gone quiet at the Watergate 2 nights ago and had not been the same since. "Oh," she said softly, "you're enormous." "Yes." "No, I mean," she stopped. Her fingers moved slightly and something crossed her face that had nothing to do with humor. "Something in you just moved, under my hand, like," she frowned, groping for it, "like a house waking up." I could not speak. "That's not a heartbeat," she said. "No." "What is it?" 60 men on the wall. My uncle in the doorway. Every rule of my house and my blood and my crown, and a woman with her hand flat on my chest, asking me a question nobody had ever thought to ask me. "It's the part of me," I said, "that has never once done what I told it to until it saw you." She took her hand back. She took it back slowly, and she stood there in the frost with her stick and her honey-sticky fingers and her one shift and her 4 coppers. And for the first time since she had walked into my yard, Ilse of nowhere did not have anything to say. Then she said, "I'm going to need more honey," and turned around and walked into a wall. The wolves came to her door on the 4th night. Not one, all 9. The boy on the east stair, a page of 14 named Corey, who I will remember until I die because of what he did, heard the claws on the stone and did not run and did not shout. He stood up with his back to her door and his little belt knife out and his whole body shaking, and he told 9 werewolves of Hollowmere that they could not come in, because the lady was sleeping. They lay down. That is what I found at midnight when the alarm brought me up the east stair with 40 men behind me and my sword in my hand. A boy standing over a knife he had dropped, and 9 wolves lying nose to tail along the length of the corridor like a rug, and every one of them with their heads down on their paws, facing her door, waiting for it to open. "Put them up," I said to my men. "Swords, all of you now. My king, they're in the hold." I said put them up. They put them up. 40 warriors backed down that stair in silence with their eyes on those animals, and I stood there alone in the dark with the wolves and the shaking boy, and I said, "Corey, M. King, you did not run." "No, M. King." His teeth were going. She takes her supper with me, M. King, on the step. She says the hall's too loud and she can't see who's laughing. He wiped his nose on his wrist and remembered who he was talking to and went white. "Beg pardon." "The hall's too loud, and she can't see who's laughing. I have led men into a mountain pass in winter. I have stood over my father's body and taken a crown off it. I have never in my life been laid open as neatly as I was on that stair by a 14-year-old boy repeating something a woman had said to him on a step. "Go to bed," I said. "You'll have my table tomorrow. Sit where you like." He went, I stayed. I sat down on the top step of my own east stair like a man with nowhere to be, and I looked at 9 ruined animals lying outside a beggar's door, and I understood slowly, the way you understand a wound after the cold wears off, that they were not guarding her. They were keeping her. The way the poor keep a thing, close and quiet and without any expectation of being allowed to. I knew that feeling. I had been feeling it for 4 days. It got worse. I had known it would get worse. I am not a stupid man, whatever else I am, but I had assumed the worsening would happen at a rate I could govern. That is the disease of kings. We believe we are the ones setting the pace. She began to fill my hold. Not loudly. She didn't hold court. She'd have laughed at the idea. She simply went places with her stick and her steady hand on the wall, and things happened around her. She learned the kitchen in a day and the armory in 3, and she never once got lost twice in the same corridor, because she counted, and she remembered, and she asked. She told Alan he was wasting good marrowbone and made him render it, and then made him show her how. And by the 2nd week, the old man was following her about with his flinch gone out of his shoulders, saying aye and nay to her in the tone he used to use with my grandmother. She found out which of my scullions could sing, and which only thought he could and told him so to his face. And the boy took it well because she then spent a solid hour teaching him to breathe from his belly, sitting on a flour sack, entirely serious. She would not take money. I offered her a purse, a good one, a king's purse, an insulting amount, and she weighed it in her hand and said, "What's this for?" "For your keep." "I'm not keeping, I'm working." "For the wolf's foot, then." She put it back in my hand and folded my fingers over it, which is the closest thing to touching me she had done since the frost, and she said, "Rorik, if you pay me, I'm a healer you've hired and I'll go when the work's done. Is that what you want?" I stood in my own solar with a purse in my fist and could not produce one single word. "No," she agreed entirely to herself, "thought not." And she went off down the corridor with her stick going tick, tick, tick on the flagstones and left me standing there. My beast slipped the hold on the 9th night. I want that understood. It did not ask. In 12 years as king and 19 years before that as a boy learning to carry it, my beast had never once come forward without my hand on the leash. That is what a Lycan King is, not the biggest wolf, the best leashed one. I woke at the hour of the wolf with frost on the inside of my window and stone under my hands, and I was down the east corridor on 4 feet with my breath going out of me in white ropes, and I had no memory of standing up. I stopped at her door. I lay down. I put my great scarred skull on my forepaws in the dark outside a blind beggar's chamber like a hound at a hearth, and my body which had killed men, which had held a pass, which the North told stories about, sighed and settled, and would not move. And that is where the entire hold of Hollowmere found their king at dawn. 9 wolves along the corridor. And at her threshold 1 more. Bigger than all of them, coat black as lake water, eyes anyone in that hold would have known blindfolded. Old Allen got there first, because old men wake early, and he stopped dead in the corridor with a basin in his hands and looked at me for a long, long moment. Then he put the basin down very carefully, and he turned round and he went back the way he'd come, and he began, audibly, methodically, at the top of the east stair, in a voice you could hear in the kitchens, sending every single person in that hold somewhere else. He gave me 30 minutes. I have loved a few people in my life. I loved Allen for that. I shifted back in the dark of the stairwell with my hands shaking and my jaw shaking and the taste of iron in my mouth, and I got my breeches on, and I stood there with my forehead against the cold stone and thought, quite calmly, the way you think when the ground has finished going. It has chosen. It went and lay down at her door and it did not ask me, and it is never going to unchoose. And under that, colder. She has 4 coppers and 1 shift and she can't see me, and she doesn't know, and if she ever finds out she'll think she's been trapped in a story she never asked to be in. Her door opened. "Rorik," she said to the corridor, to nobody, unerringly, "you're breathing like a man about to do something stupid." The bell tower gave her up in the 3rd week, and it was Corey who did it, because I had told the boy to sit where he liked, and he had taken me at my word and gone everywhere. Hollowmere sits in a lake. Half of it always has. There is a bell tower out on the shallows that my great-grandfather's great-grandfather drowned when he raised the weir, and in autumn when the water drops you can walk the causeway to it and look at the carvings around its base, moon figures, wolf figures, the old work nobody reads anymore because nobody can. Corey came running into my hall with his hair wet to the shoulder and shouted, in front of my whole table, "Beg pardon, King, but the tower's got her on it." I had not planned to go. I went. She came because she wanted to touch it. She was very clear that a carving you cannot touch is a rumor, and she went along that causeway with her hand in the crook of my arm and her stick tapping the stones, and my Uncle Vayer came too, at a distance, with 4 of his men, watching. And I let him because I was arrogant, and because I wanted him to see. The base of the tower was black with weed and 40 generations of water. Allen and two of the lads scraped it back. The carving ran the whole way round. Women, a line of them hand to hand, carved small and plain, walking the shore of a lake that was still there. And walking with them, under them, around them, wolves, dozens of wolves, worn down to suggestions, their heads all turned the same way, all turned to the women. And every one of the carved women had her eyes closed. Not shut in death, not shut in prayer, closed the way a person closes their eyes when they are listening to something more important than anything they could look at. I read it out to her, stone by stone, because she asked me to, and I described every worn figure, and she stood with her hand flat on the wet carving and her face turned up at nothing, and she said, in a voice I had never heard her use, "Rorik, what does the writing say?" There was writing, a band of it, old script cut deep. I have 4 languages, I did not have that one. Allen, I said. Allen came and knelt in the shallows, and put his 2-fingered hand on the letters, and moved his lips and went gray. Allen, it's the keeping word, my king, he said. It's the old kennel word, it's what my grandfather's book had at the front and I never could make it out. He looked up at me and there were tears running into his beard which I had not once in 40 years seen. It says, he swallowed, it says they do not obey, they are only ever asked. Nobody spoke. The lake made the small slapping noise a lake makes. They're moon singers, Allen said. The old holds kept 'em, not healers, not witches, singers. Went along why the pack and they'd ask King, and the wolves'd come. That's how it were done before. He stopped. Before my grandfather, I said. I said Allen, before the chains. And Ilse, who had not moved, whose hand was still flat on the carving of a woman with her eyes closed, said, very quietly, my mother had a tune, she said it wasn't anything. She said her mother had it too, and it wasn't anything, and I wasn't to sing it in towns. Her fingers went slowly over the worn stone shoulders of a woman 1,000 years dead. It's the one I was humming, in the yard, that first night. She turned her face toward me, and it was the only time I ever saw her frightened. Rorik, she said, is that what I am? Behind us on the causeway, my Uncle Vayer began softly to laugh. He came to me that night in my solar with a cup of my own wine in his hand, and his father's ring on his finger, and 40 years of patience in his face. A beggar, he said, who happens to be the last of a bloodline nobody's seen since the chains, who happens to walk in through the one gate nobody watches, on the one night the wolves break loose. He turned the cup. And she happens to be blind, so she can't be shown a lie. Very tidy, nephew. Somebody's been very tidy. Say what you came to say. The lords are coming to the right, Vayer said. All of them. As they come every 40 years, as they came for your father, as they came for your grandfather. And every one of them will stand in that yard on the equinox and watch the wolves of Hollowmere refuse to bow to you again. And then they will go home and they will say, as they have said for 4 decades, that the King of Hollowmere is a man holding a chair he cannot fill. He drank. Unless he produces a girl, Vayer smiled. A conveniently blind girl from nowhere with no name and no witnesses who can do the one thing you cannot. And the lords will look at that, Rorik, and they will not see a miracle. They will see a trick. And they will say the King of Hollowmere could not even buy his wolves. He had to hire a woman to do it for him. I did not move. And when they say it, he went on gently, you will kill someone because you always do, and then it will be true. Get out. He got up. At the door he stopped. I'm fond of you, he said, and the terrible thing is that I think it was true. You are a better man than your father and a far better man than the old one. But you have been carrying that yard since you were 19 and it has eaten you. And now you have found something warm and you are going to hold it up in front of 6 holds and ask them to call it destiny. He shook his head. They will call it a leash, and she will hear them. The door shut. I stood there a very long time. Then I went and found her. She was on the east step with a bowl of marrow bones and the old scarred wolf's head on her knee, and Corey beside her. And the boy scrambled up when he saw me, and I waved him down, and he sat. And that, the boy staying seated in the presence of his king, because his king waved him down on a step at midnight, tells you more about what she had done to my house in 3 weeks than anything else I could set here. Corey, I said, go to bed. He went but slowly, and he looked back twice. I sat down on the step. The old wolf opened an eye at me and shut it again. He's not going to fight you for me, Ilse said. He's just cold. Ilse? Oh. The rite is in 6 days. I know everyone's polishing everything. Alan's beside himself. She dug in the bowl. 6 holds, he says, every lord in the north. They come every 40 years to watch the wolves bow to the king, and they've not bowed since your grandfather, and everyone's very careful not to say so in front of you. She held a bone down. The wolf took it with enormous delicacy. He didn't say that last part. I worked it out. You always do. Yes, she wiped her hand on her skirt. Rorik asked me. My throat closed. They'll say I bought you, I said. Yes. They'll say the King of Hollowmere hired a blind singer to do what his blood couldn't, and they'll say it in front of you. And some of them will say it to your face and think you can't hear them because you can't see them. Yes, she said. That happens to me constantly. I promise you I am better at it than you are. Ilse, ask me. I can't. It came out of me like something being torn. Do you understand what I would be doing? I would be standing you up in front of 6 holds, and every man in that yard would think you were mine because I'd bought you, and you'd have nothing, no name, no blood they'd honor, no. I stopped. I made myself stop. You have 4 coppers and 1 shift. I know because you tore the other half off it for his foot. Silence. The lake somewhere doing what it does. You counted my shifts, she said. Ilse. Rorik. She turned her face to me, and she was not smiling now. I have been given things by men before. I have been given a bed and a meal and a coat, and every single time there was a thing under it, and I have got very good at feeling for the thing under it. And for 3 weeks I have been going over you like a splinter in a foot, and I cannot find it. Her voice cracked just once and steadied. There is nothing under it. You want nothing. You have not asked me for the tune. Not once. Not in 3 weeks. Not on the causeway. Not tonight. And it's 6 days, and you need it. And you have never once asked. I could not speak. So ask me, she said, because I have been waiting, and it is killing me that you won't. And I am not a thing you have hired, and I am not a trick, and I am not something you found. I walked in, through your water gate, on my own 2 feet in the dark, and I sat down in your yard. She put her hand out. She put it out into the empty air between us, palm up, the way she had held it out for a wolf. Open, asking nothing, taking nothing. They only ever ask, she said. It's carved on your tower. And behind my breastbone, the thing that had never once obeyed me came all the way forward and lay down. I put my hand in hers. 6 holds came to Hollowmere for the rite, and every one of them came to watch me fail. They were courteous about it. That is the thing about the North. We are extremely courteous while we are pricing a man. They rode in over 3 days with their banners and their sons and their wolves were fine, sleek, obedient, walking at heel, and every lord who brought one walked it past my kennel yard on the way to my hall so that I could see it. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. Old Marek of Thornhow clasped my arm and looked into my face with real, kindly pity and said, "It's a hard inheritance, lad." And I stood there in my own gate and let him say it. Because he was right. It was a hard inheritance, and I had been carrying it wrong for 12 years, carrying it like a stone I had to be strong enough to lift, when the whole time the answer carved on my own drowned tower was that it was never a stone at all. They do not obey, they are only ever asked. My grandfather had never asked anything of anyone in his life. Neither until 3 weeks ago. Had I. The morning of the rite, I went to her chamber and I did not knock, because I had told myself all night I would knock, and then I did not. And she said, "Come in, Rorik," from the other side of the door before my hand was up. "How do you always? You walk like a man carrying furniture." She was sitting on the end of the bed with her boots on. "It's terrible. Everyone can hear you. Corey does an impression." "Corey is 14 and will be flogged." "Corey is 14 and is now, I gather, sitting at the king's table, so I think we can all guess how frightened he is." She stood up and put her hand out for the wall and got the doorframe and found me by the sound of my breathing. "It's today." "It's today." "How many?" "6 holds. About 400 people. They will fill the walls of the yard and they will stand shoulder to shoulder and they will all be looking at you." I made myself say the rest of it. "And I cannot make them kind. I have gone through it all night ilse every way, and I can command them to be silent, I can command them to be still, and I cannot command a single one of them to be kind, and if I try to, they will only despise you more quietly." She thought about that. "Good," she said. "Good. You could have lied." She reached up, she had to reach, and she found my jaw with her fingertips and left them there a moment, which she had never done. "Everyone lies to me about rooms. It's not far, there's no step, nobody's looking at you. I have fallen down a great many steps that weren't there." Her hand dropped. "You've never lied about a room." "No." "Then don't start." She picked up her stick. "Now describe it to me, all of it. The ground, the walls, the wind, everything you can see. I want to walk into that yard knowing it better than they do." So I did. I sat on the floor of the east chamber in my crown and my war cloak with my back against the bed, on the morning of the 40-year rite, with 6 holds assembling below, and I described my own kennel yard to a blind woman for 1 solid hour. Every stone, every crack in the frost, the 9 paces from the Watergate arch to the wellhead, the way the wind comes off the lake and turns left at the corner of the kennel wall, the sound the gallery makes when it fills. She listened with her eyes closed. Then she said, "The wind turns left at the kennel wall." "Yes." "Then I'll sing from the wellhead," she said, "and it'll carry to the far wall on its own, and I won't have to push." And she stood up and shook out her skirts. The one shift, Mendid and Allen had found her a plain gray overdress that had belonged to somebody's mother, and she had accepted it because it was practical, and she said, "Right. Let's go and be a scandal." I will tell this part exactly as it happened. The yard was full. 400 people on the walls and the gallery, and packed along the kennel roof. 6 lords in the front rank with their sons and their heels, and the frost was down hard, and the sky was that white the north gets at equinox, and the iron gate at the far end was shut. I stood in the center by the wellhead in the regalia of Hollowmere, and beside me stood a blind beggar singer in a borrowed gray dress with a wooden whistle on a cord round her neck, and I put my hand on her shoulder in front of every soul on that wall, and I did not take it off. Weyer stood at my right, where he was entitled to stand, smiling. Old Marek of Thornhouse spoke the words because he was the eldest. "Rorik, son of Rolf, son of Roderick, the pack of Hollowmere is called. Let it come and let it answer its king." And Allen, alone at the far end of that yard with his ruined hand, drew the bolt on the iron gate. They came out low. 400 people made a sound I hope never to hear again. That indrawn hiss of a crowd deciding all at once that it is closer to the front than it wanted to be. And up on the wall I heard steel, 6 holds worth of steel, coming out of 6 holds worth of scabbards. The 9 wolves of Hollowmere walked into that yard and stopped, and looked at 400 armed men, and changed. I felt it go out of them. The 3 weeks, the marrow bones and the honeyed foot and the corridor at midnight. Every bit of it went out of them in a single breath, and what was standing in my yard was what my grandfather had made. 9 flat-eyed things that had been given nothing and expected nothing, and knew exactly what 400 men with drawn steel meant. The old scarred one's hackles came up. "Rorik," Weyer said low and delighted, "command them." And every eye in that yard came to me, and I understood with a clarity like cold water that he had wanted this exact moment for 40 years. Not the yard, not the chair. This. Rorik of Hollowmere in front of 6 holds, doing the only thing he had ever been taught to do. I opened my mouth to give the command. And I heard at my shoulder, very quietly, "Rorik, don't." I shut my mouth. 400 people watched the King of Hollowmere stand in his own kennel yard with his crown on and say nothing, and I took my hand off her shoulder, and I stepped back. 1 pace. The gasp went round that gallery like fire in dry grass. Marek came half out of his seat. Veyer's face, I looked at Veyer's face, I made a point of it. Veyer's face went absolutely white, because he had spent 4 decades planning for me to be a strong man and had never once planned for me to be a quiet one. Ilse walked to the wellhead alone. She counted it. I saw her lips move. 9 paces from where I'd left her, the way I'd told her, and she put her hand out at the 9th and the stone was there, and she rested her fingers on it, and she turned her face into the wind coming off the lake. 400 people, 9 wolves, silence. And the beggar singer of nowhere said, conversationally, into that silence, to 9 feral animals who had known only iron for 40 years. "Come here then, it's all right, nobody's asking you for anything." And she sang. It was the same tune. That is the thing I want set down, because the lords have made it very grand since, and it wasn't. It was the flat little nothing tune she'd hummed to herself in the frost on the equinox, because she was cold and bored and wanted her own company. Her mother's tune, that wasn't anything. 3 notes down and 2 up and a low hold at the end like a woman letting out a breath. Only now she sang it with her whole chest, from the well head, with the wind turning left at the kennel wall and carrying it up the stone, and it went into that yard and it went up the walls and it went out over 400 people, and it did not bounce back off anything, because there was nothing in it to bounce. No command, no claim, nothing under it. The old scarred wolf's hackles went down. He took 1 step, then another, and behind him, in a loose, ragged line in the frost, in front of 6 holds and their drawn steel, 8 more. They came to the well head. They came slowly, the way you come to something you don't believe is there. The old one reached her first, and he put his enormous ruined head under her hand, and she stopped singing, she stopped, and the whole yard broke, 400 people leaning forward as one animal, and she said, out loud, plainly, "There you are." And the wolves of Hollowmere lay down at her feet, and lowered their heads to the frost, and did not raise them. All 9. Marek of Thornhouse sat down like a man whose legs had gone. Somewhere on the kennel roof, a boy, Corey, it was Corey, began to shout and was hauled flat by his own father. And on that gallery, 6 holds of the north, who had come 4 days' ride to watch me fail, went to their knees, because when the pack bows there is only one thing a Lycan does, and their bodies did it before their minds could stop them. 400 people knelt in my kennel yard. And I did not. I stood in the frost with my crown on and my hands empty, and I watched my grandfather's ruin lie down in front of a woman with 4 coppers, and my beast came all the way up in me, and I let it, in front of every lord in the north, without a leash on it, and it did not roar. It went to her. I crossed that yard on 2 feet, and the wolves did not move for me, and I did not ask them to. I stepped over them, and I stopped in front of her, and there was nothing in my hands, no cloak to throw, no crown to offer. Allen swears I was shaking. I expect I was. I turned my hands over. Palm up, open, the way she had held hers out on the east step, the way you hold a hand out to something that has only ever been chained. "Ilse," I said, and 400 people heard it, because I did not lower my voice. "You are the last moon singer of the north, and you walked into my yard on your own 2 feet, and I have nothing to give you that you did not already do yourself." I did not close my hands. "I am not going to claim you," I said. "I am not going to name you or crown you or hold you. I will not put one more thing on you that you did not ask for. My voice went. I did not care. I am asking, that is all I have. I am asking you to stay. The silence in that yard was the loudest thing I have ever stood inside. She reached out. She reached out into the empty air with her palm up, the way she always did, searching, patient, expecting nothing. And her fingers found mine, and she closed her hands around them. Yes, said Ilse, obviously. And the old scarred wolf lifted his head off the frost and howled, and the 8 took it up. And up on that gallery, 6 holds of the north got up off their knees and made a noise like the lake coming over the weir. We were mated at the turn of the year in the yard, because she said the hall was too loud and she couldn't see who was laughing, and I said then we would do it where she could hear everything, and we did. She never took a crown. She was offered one. I offered her one, and Marek offered her one, and half the north offered her one, and she turned them all down with the same phrase, which was that a crown is a thing you have to keep on, and she had enough to keep track of. She wore a plain gray overdress that had belonged to somebody's mother until it wore through, and then she wore another one. She would not let me build a kennel. She had the iron gate taken off its hinges and thrown in the lake, and the yard was left open, and the wolves went where they liked, which was, as it turned out, mostly wherever she was. There I sent south with an estate and an income and a title, which is what you do with a man who was right about everything except you. He wrote eventually. She made me answer. Alan taught her the kennel word. She taught it to Corey. Corey is my kennel master now, and he is 31 years old, and he has never in his life raised his voice to an animal, and the young wolves of Hollowmere follow him about the yard like ducklings. And when the lords come to look at them, they always ask him the same question, and he always gives them the same answer, and the answer is a woman's. She is asleep now. It's late. The fire's down. The old scarred one died 4 winters back with his head on her lap, and she cried for 2 days, and then she went and got a puppy because she is a practical woman. I have been sitting here a long time, watching her breathe, and thinking about a man who stood in a kennel yard with his cloak in the frost and had made his peace with the arithmetic. He was going to fight them. That was all he had. He was 19 years of being taught that a thing you cannot command is a thing you must break, and 12 years of a crown that would not sit, and he stood in the dark ready to die of it rather than admit he did not know another way. And a blind woman walked in through the water gate because nobody had thought to bar it, and she sat down on the freezing stone, and she put her hands palm up on her knees. I have ruled well since. The North says so. They say Hollowmere is the only hold where the wolves come when you call, and they always ask me how it is done, every one of them, lords and captains and boys, and I always tell them the truth, and they never once believe me. You don't call them, I say. You ask,